Coming to you live from the top of the CN Tower, it's the Absynthe Podcast. And just because the idea of doing a podcast up on a windy stage where it's just you here, because that's got to be like the windiest place in Toronto, right? Is the top of the CN Tower.
I reckon, yeah.
And so, and I once we have some people who are humorous on the podcast, I'll make funny descriptions.
You know, I'm in the same room as you. You know that, right?
He's a man that's as stoic as the statue of David. It's Mark Ellis.
Yeah, I just wish I looked more like him.
Actually, let's do that real quick. We'll introduce ourselves just quickly for, the impending audience who would be out there. My name is Tyler Holt, if you don't know out there. I'm the director, producer, and almighty god of the Absynthe Media and Absynthe Magazine and Absynthe Podcast. And joining me today, this lovely man over here with this incredible mustache that's making him look more like Yosemite Sam by the minute. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Mark Ellis, and I'm hanging out.
That's very modest. He's one of our staff writers that is writing for us now on the Absynthe Magazine. Today, this live stream is going out on September 1st. If you're listening to us live, you'll also be able to, of course, see the publication date if you're watching this on YouTube later. However, this is so concludes our first month of production. But moving on from that, we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Our second guest tonight is almost as gorgeous as my first guest. And go ahead.
Hi, my name is Patricia Smith, and I am a housemate with these two lovely gentlemen, and I get to put up with their humor all the time. So we're just going to bless you with a bit of it tonight.
Yeah, we'll see how much humor there is and how much just random bullshit we're talking about.
I'm going to guess 90% random bullshit, 5% humor, and hopefully 5% something interesting.
5% something. I don't think you led up to a whole 100% there, did you?
95 and 5?
95 and 5?
Should be fine.
95 and 5 or 95 and then another 5%?
90, 5, and 5.
Man, you know what? It is so great that I don't have to do math anymore. Like, I wasn't bad at it in high school. In fact, I did calculus, and I got a pretty good grade, too. But I was really frustrated because doing, I can't remember what I was doing, where the math came in, but I tried doing, like, subtraction, and I forgot how to carry, and I felt so dumb that I immediately started watching math lessons on YouTube just because I was so embarrassed that I forgot how to borrow a number for just doing simple subtraction, because usually the way that I've done math for all my life is like an abstract way of doing things. If I see a 7 and, like, let's say, okay, so this is really, really simplified, but let's say I see a 7 and I have to subtract by 5. Normally I just go 2 because 5 and 7, they're close enough. But to give you an idea of how I think, I would take the 5 and I'd cut it down into 3 and 2, and then I'd take 3 and then subtract that by the 4, like for the 7 to get 4, and then just take the remainder and do the rest of the subtraction. So the way that I've always done math for addition and subtraction and sometimes multiplication or division is I'll break apart the numbers and put them back together because I'll separate things into more even categories as opposed to like bigger numbers. And
That's
yeah.
fair.
Interesting. I wonder where your teachers came up with that
They
idea.
didn't. That was me. That was all me. I'm not gonna blame any of my teachers out there.
Just the back of your class, the spitball
Miss
shooter
Fabro, if
waiting
you're
there.
out there listening right now, you did great. I'm just a fuck up. I'm sorry.
Okay,
That's
so
one way to put it.
That's hopeful for the teachers of the future.
Well, okay, so here's a serious question. I learned calculus, like I said, and that's like a lot of math that has to do with the real world. You're doing curves, and that's what the world's about is curves. I was trying to make a pop reference to curves or something like that, but
yeah.
you give variances in real life, like friction and things like that. How much of that do you use in chemistry?
You use it a little bit in chemistry. What you tend to use more in chemistry is the differentiation part. So you look at a curve and you try to find this, like you have the slope and you're trying to find like the rate of change of a reaction. Just so in case people don't know me, I'm a chemical physicist, so this is what I do. So yeah, rate of change is something that we like to look at, like the rate of a change of a reaction, or the concentration of a equilibrium and stuff like that.
Mark, how much math do you use in your field of study?
I use just about none or possibly infinity. We like to use infinity a bit with philosophy and whatnot. I mean, when I was going through high school, I was taking all my math courses really diligently. I was taking all my sciences. I was like, I'm going to go be an engineer. And then, grade 12 rolled around, and people started asking me what I want to do with my life. And I was like, hey, I know what to study to help me figure that one out. So I started studying philosophy in my kind of grade 12 year. And I was like, hey, this philosophy stuff's pretty cool. Dropped all my math and science and was just like, I'm going to go do philosophy and find out about life.
Yeah, no, it's just isn't it just great to not have to deal with like actual numbers though? I mean, like calculus or algebra. What's the last time you used algebra realistically?
I was sitting in the environmental science building, and a friend came up to me with a science equation and was looking to isolate one of his variables, and I looked at it and I could do most of it for the most part, except for I was missing how to remove an exponent from one side and put it onto the other side. I couldn't remember square root, and I didn't have the right calculator to be able to work on it. But by myself, I don't really use math.
Yeah, no. So something that immediately came to mind when you said the science building is that I've been, spoiler alert for anyone who's out there who follows any of my literary work, I've been writing about movies today, a lot about movies, doing some movie suggestions and reviews for our upcoming October release. And I looked into urban legends just recently. Not urban legend. Technically, it's Urban Legends Final Cut. If you go looking for urban legends, you will find A, a better movie, and B, a better trailer.
Yep.
And it's not important because they're both really bad. So Urban Legends Final Cut is a horror movie that was directed to by a guy who knew a guy, basically. I've forgotten his name. I just wrote it down like 30 minutes ago. No, the director's name. So the director surprisingly worked really closely and has worked really closely with Bryan Singer, who very famously did The Usual Suspects and is very critically acclaimed. The guy who I'm talking about in particular who directed Urban Legends Final Cut actually has kind of an impressive filmography, but it's a little strange because it's just who he's affiliated with. Anyways, the whole point I'm trying to get to it is that I watched the trailer, and I don't know if you probably know, you don't know about Urban Legends, Patricia?
No,
so it is, Urban Legends Final Cut was a movie that was filmed on Trent University campus.
Oh, I'd heard about that film, but I didn't know what it was called.
Yeah, and so, I mean, the trailer looks good, the ideas look good. Basically, the premise is that the movie is, so the first movie is all about the victims are killed off in the way the urban legends are told. So like the Hookman stories or different urban legends or like Pop Rocks and Soda kind of things. The second movie, however, bends reality a little bit, or at least the perception of reality by the audience, because it's called Final Cut. It's a whole bunch of film students who are being murdered, and they're filming something at the same time. So it'll do these drastic cuts where something terrible will be happening and there'll be blood and stuff, and then that's just a set dressing that an actress is at. And what's a little pathetic is that they spell that out for the audience in the trailer. It would have been something that would have been interesting to go into the movie and not realize. Joy and I are going to watch it at some point just because of that. But also, in investigating this movie, another really great movie was filmed here in Peterborough, which was Jumper, which is actually one of my favorite movies. That I'm really upset that it didn't get a sequel. You've never seen it, but you've seen it, right, Mark?
No, I haven't even seen it.
You've never seen Jumper?
I've just seen the trailers.
Just the trailer.
Just once.
Yeah, it's got Nick Fury in it, Samuel L. Jackson.
That's one way to put it, yeah.
Okay, so, I mean, you're from Oshawa and you're from Ottawa. Have you guys, I mean, there's got to be movies that are filmed there in some degree. Have you ever seen?
There's so many in Oshawa.
I have a boatload. So just down the street from me, there's a historic building, the McLaughlin Residence. So it's like a big old estate. So they use it for all sorts of things. It's in Billy Madison. They have a sea-doo going around in the fountain out back of the garden.
Oh, no way! I know that scene. Okay, that's awesome.
Absolutely, that's like right down the street from me. Kind of if you like, a few hundred meters away, and you'd be at my house. I know there's some Jackie Chan that's been filmed there. It's actually really comical because there's just kind of a cement doorway kind of out in the garden, basically. It's like garden dressing kind of idea. And in one of the scenes, Jackie Chan breaks through this door and he's in the bad guy's lair. And it was just hilarious to know that, hey, that door doesn't actually go anywhere. It's all outside. But, I get to know that because I know the place they're filming. But in the movie, it's just like, oh, yeah, it makes total sense.
Didn't you almost accidentally become an extra in one of these movies?
So yeah, when my mom was looking after the neighborhood kids, she'd have like half a dozen kids with her, and they were all going around. They'd visit the gardens and go for a walk generally. But of course, when they were filming a movie, we'd all try to look and see some exciting action. But It turns out, the lady with the clipboard came by and was like, "Oh, are these the extras? Quick, we got to get you over to
You almost became
whatever
famous.
part of the
It would have
movies."
been Mark's great debut. That's awesome.
So they had the lady with the clipboard, and all the kids, neighborhood kids, just follow her. And there was my panicked mother just being like, "Oh, where are you going with the kids? Well, they can be extras if you want them to, but
That's great. That's amazing.
Lot
Yeah,
of
all
fun.
my time living in California, that never happened to me. My sister went off to Los Angeles and Hollywood Hollywood is in Los Angeles. And she met actors, but I've never really met anyone, to be honest. It's not like you step outside. However, there's a whole bunch of films that were made back in my hometown, like Tremors or Iron Man. Some scenes were filmed there.
Right.
A whole bunch of spaghetti westerns back in the day were filmed
Nice.
there. And we didn't go. Did you see Godzilla?
I haven't
The
seen
new
any
one?
Godzilla.
Yeah, the new one.
Missing
Yeah.
it.
So there's a
Oh,
scene
good.
where they're taking a missile, and they present the scene where it begins at, where there's a train. They're taking the missiles via train, which in 2015 is, of course, the most effective way to take a nuke anywhere, right, on a train.
Totally.
And so it prefaces it with Lone Pine, which is a city out like 45 minutes away from Big Pine, which I live. All of them are just pines. It's Lone Pine, Solo Pine, Big Pine, Small Pine, Little Pine.
Red pine, blue
Pining for
pine?
your nits. No, it was Lone Pine, Big Pine. Then there was Independence and Bishop, and it was just shite from one end of the highway to the next. It's just a string of little, like, I used to think a really poetic way to put it is they're like beads on a necklace, but it's just shit beads on a necklace is what it is. It's more like stink bait on like a fishing line. That was the best I got, was those kind of scenes. I mean, like, I flipped out when I saw Godzilla. I'm like, Lone Pine, oh my god, yes! Fucking represent! And then they had a train, which Lone Pine hasn't had a train for 100 years. They have a museum where the trains used to run through. It would be more believable to say that they put a nuke in Peterborough and took it on train, because at least we have working trains here.
That we do.
Yeah, we do. It's surprising how much filming, though, goes on in Canada if you look at stuff. So considering Jumper, what they did, and it's got to be all because it's got to be cheaper to film here, which is crazy
Definitely.
considering
Imagine.
work visas and things. But maybe they get whatever sort of material that they need here in Canada or store it in Canada, and then all the other like extras and work people they get are Canadian.
Yeah, they definitely get the extras Canadian, because somebody who I met I'm doing the Bachelor of Education, somebody I just met, she ended up being an extra in Camp Rock because they were filming at a lake near her, near the hotel that her mom was at, with all the fancy Jonas Brothers and people. So she was able to, they just came in asking for, okay, we need teenage girls to be extras at this camp, and she went.
They just lined up. Okay.
Yeah.
So Jumper, you can go on YouTube and just type in. What I did in Google is where was Jumper filmed in Peterborough, and there was a set that was on the corner of. I'm gonna mess this up. It's like, I think it might have been Hunter and George. It was right where Hasselton's is, the coffee shop.
Okay. Yeah.
And it was crazy because they brought in a whole bunch of fake trash cans and newspaper stands, so they would make it look a little bit more like New York. Those small, tiny things just all of a sudden make small-town Peterborough look like this giant metropolis. And then they covered up all of the storefronts with American branding. So the CIBC became a American bank, and Hasselton's became a Seattle's Best. A Seattle's Best.
Oh,
There we
okay.
go. That's the
All right,
the American coffee shop that I was thinking of, which isn't great coffee, to be completely honest. People get down on Starbucks, but I prefer Starbucks over Seattle's Best.
See,
And Dunkin' Donuts.
I don't drink coffee, so I prefer Starbucks because they have a lot of non-coffee drinks.
Well, they
that
do
I enjoy.
Tazo tea, right?
Yeah.
Which I believe was featured on the American version of Shark Tank, which is not usually how people refer to that show.
Well, because
Right.
Shark Tank is the American version.
What's the Canadian version called?
Dragon's Den.
Oh, okay, there we go.
Yeah.
Shark Tank and Dragon's Den.
Yeah. So
That's really good branding.
I don't
It's a
know.
little confusing, but good titles.
Maybe
I
that's
don't
why
know if
people-
it was Tazo's tea that was on it, but Tiavana was the one that was paired with Starbucks, and they were the one that were trying to do to tea as Starbucks did to coffee. I think that was one of their taglines because I ended up watching that episode.
Yeah, I think that's the only episode I've ever seen completely all the way through.
Well, there was Dragon's Den stuff done at Trent. A lot of the business students did some proposals and such.
That's right. They had the auditions in the LEC pit one year for auditioning for the show to get on. which was like pretty cool. You like wake up in the morning, you like go down to the cafeteria, like, oh, what's new and exciting today? And you're like, holy crap, Dragon's Den is here. Oh my goodness. You know, it was just an exciting morning, even though I didn't even see anything, just a couple signs, but still neat.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the things that's actually kind of cool, I'd like to have Caitlin on at some point to do the podcast, because speaking of Dragon's Den, Underworld LARP was on Dragon's Den at one point. I tried to find the video clip,
You're
but I
right, yeah.
couldn't because they only post things on Facebook for those things in 25-minute spurts, and trying to find a single proposal in Dragon's Den is just impossible. But yeah, for those who are listening who don't know what Underworld is, it's Underworld LARP, which is an organization that creates and hosts serialized LARP events. They used to do it out in Janetville. Now they do it someplace north of here. They purchased their own land. They used to be renting it from farmers, but it was pretty legit. I went once, and I mean, it was what it was. It was kind of like going camping with a whole bunch of people I didn't know. Usually when you go camping and you go to like a camp space, the most unpleasant part of it is all the other people who are camping around you, where you're just like, go the fuck away. I want to commune with nature and become enlightened. And
you need to choose better places to camp then.
Listen, little lady, I lived in the rural outback of California in the Sierra Nevada mountain range. There were plenty of places to camp. But okay, so when I went camping, I would go with like my grandma, who had a couple of tents and a small RV, and we would, rough it in the tents, and she and my aunt would be in the trailer. But I mean, have you not been to? I guess that, no, it's a different situation out here in Canada, because you can go, 5-6 miles out of town and you're in a forest, and no one's gonna bother you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I guess that's true, but you're talking to somebody who's been camping in Algonquin Park since they were 3.
Yeah, okay, so but that's not camping. That's like super camping.
Well,
there's a difference,
there's
because
camping, and then there's interior camping where you go on canoe trips.
that's just the
There's a difference.
uppity snobbish way of saying super camping. Interior camping. That's, you just defended yourself by making my point.
Well, let's just say if you call RVing camping, then yes, interior camping is super camping.
No, I mean, I never camped in an RV. I knew people who brought RVs, but when I went camping, there was never a risk that I was going to die. When you go out to Algonquin, people die out in Algonquin at Banff like all the time.
Banff
They get
is in
lost.
Alberta.
Yeah, but there's still fucking big forests.
Algonquin's not in Alberta.
I know that. Algonquin's here in Ontario. I know
Okay.
where Banff is. I do have an amateuristic nature of knowledge of the geography of Canada. I did do a year of high school here.
Okay.
So, but that's exactly it. You go to Algonquin and you have to bring all of your food, and I don't mean you have to bring all of your food like, oh, I'm going to bring hot dogs and stuff and we'll pick up some snacks from, the town next over. No, you go to Algonquin and that's fucking it. You want more food, you got to have to hunt or cultivate out there.
You do know there's the Highway 60 corridor that don't have to
Highways
do
are made
that?
of asphalt, not convenience stores.
Lake of Two Rivers store where I used to bike to all the time to get an ice cream cone. There are stores.
Okay, so
Just not many.
but I mean, that's still, then that's, you're still understanding than what I'm talking about. You go up
Yeah.
there, there's the convenience store, and then there's all the fucking people who camp right next to society. Obviously, you want to try and get away from that, but with Algonquin, it's like, would you like to camp around this person who likes to cut their toenails out near the picnic bench? Or do you want to go way the fuck out and possibly get eaten by a grizzly bear? It's like Firewatch, IRL.
Yeah, it'd most likely be a black bear, but I get your point.
Yeah, that one. I don't know what kind of bears you guys have here. First, you make fun of me for not knowing where Banff is, supposedly, and then you expect me to know the fauna of northern Ontario. Where is your chill?
I lost it a few years ago. Now I just take everything too seriously, apparently.
Really edgy.
What was your experience camping, Mark?
We went camping a few times with my family. Typically, we pack up 1 or 2 cars. So I have 2 siblings, 2 parents. It makes five of us in total. And we'd camp all over the place in Ontario, mostly southern to northern, somewhere between, Peterborough, Oshawa,
like London.
and Alberta, or Algonquin Park, rather. Been out on the road once to Alberta, but
And you camped along the way, apparently.
we did camp along the way. It's cheaper than staying in motels. Sometimes campgrounds are really expensive, but
I've never had to pay for camping.
that's
never
really
done
good. I don't feel like you should have to pay. I mean,
Where
they
have
give
you been
like-
camping?
In the Sierra Nevadas, there are just campgrounds all around. You don't have to pay for camping.
Okay. See, a lot of the areas around here that people go to camping, it's either municipal, so it's owned by the city, or it's provincial, or it's national.
Oh, I'm sure it was owned by people. There would be
national.
the wild service out there who would be patrolling the area, and you would have rangers and things, and also the Bureau of Land Management, or DWP, which is the Department of Water and Power Los Angeles. They just call it DWP, so you forget that all of California is controlled by that company that is stationed in Los Angeles. There were some places that you could pay for camping, but they weren't good campgrounds. They were like really shitty campgrounds that were close to the city. But if, like, for instance, do you know who Lon Chaney is?
Nope.
He was the actor who did Wolfman and Frankenstein and a whole bunch of... he was an actor. And so Lon Chaney had a cabin up in the Sierra Nevadas. So in the valley that I lived in, there was on the eastern range, there was the Whitecaps, and then there were the Sierra Nevada propers that was on the more western side of the valley. So actually, when I say that I lived in California, during most of my life, I was not near the coast at all. There was a huge mountain range in the way, and then you still had to go a couple of hours once you surmounted that to get anywhere that smelled like salt water, besides Fresno, which smells like shit. Ew! But, no, they make raisins there. I don't know. It was just a stupid joke. But
niche.
I should have
Just-
said,
just
like...
a niche joke.
Yeah, Bakersville. There's one for all of the Californians who are listening in. Fuck you, Bakersville. Anyways, so yeah, I mean, you could just go out, and so Seventh Lake, it was a series of lakes. You could start at 7th and go all the way up to 1. So there's 7 large lakes, and you would go up on the mountainside, and you would still have snow up there at like 3rd Lake during July. And me and my friends walked from 7th to 3rd Lake. We gave up after that because getting to 1st Lake was like a distant dream at 17 years old. But no, we didn't have to pay for camping down there. If we were like camping at the base, we might have had to pay some sort of fee. But up there, no one cares. There's just too much land to regulate.
So I guess it's the equivalent here. That type of land we just call Crown's land. And if you can camp on Crown's land and basically do whatever you want.
Yeah, we don't call anything Crown's land in America.
Yeah.
That would be
It's
kind of
just crown. There's just one. It's not multiple. It's just crown.
It possesses. They possess the land.
well, we wouldn't say anything with a crown because we left that shit behind
Exactly.
Yeah.
quite a while ago. But
so what would you call it then?
I mean, the
Government
idea of
land.
land ownership is so ubiquitous throughout American culture. I can't imagine that you could spit anywhere and it wouldn't be landing on something that belonged to someone. It would belong to the government or be protected in some way, but, if they're not enforcing any sort of payment, then you just don't gotta. You don't have to pay.
Of course.
Fair
I
enough.
mean, in the first place, because they never had like kiosks or buildings where you would talk to someone to get like information from. If anything, you found something like that online or you looked up a tour guide. I mean, sometimes they had people, I guess, who were there, but they weren't there to facilitate some sort of customer base. They were formal park rangers. And I don't mean that like park for the people. I mean park as in this is a wild habitat, and there would be grizzly bears out there and elk and all sorts of wildlife that are just living. And then any sort of trails that were there were all man-made by people who went there and forested there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because like I went down to Utah and Nevada and Arizona and such on a trip back in 2009, and we still stayed on like in campsites because I guess that's what we were used to. So and we went to like Zion National Park and like a bunch of the national parks and like Arches National Park and Monument Valley and stuff like that. So then we did a canoe trip. So I guess we stuck to the places that you would have to pay. So.
Well, okay, so that's also the thing is that we lived relatively close to Yosemite, and I never went, unfortunately. So I suppose that if we were going to want to try camping there, we would have had to pay some sort of thing. But again, that's a national park. These places weren't protected by any sort of like national service. It was all, I would say, it wasn't even necessarily state. It was mostly municipal kind of thing that would have been going on there. And there must have been some sort of infrastructure put in place because we had fish farms that we would feed the lakes and rivers out there with because fishing was so popular out there. Yeah, that's actually probably the biggest regulatory service that we had out there. The Bureau of Land Management was out there to make sure that people weren't like burning fires or anything, but really the people who held most of the keys to any gates would have been Fish and Game.
Wow. Okay then.
There you have it. Good conversation about camping. I like the idea of not having to pay for like a 20 foot by 20 foot dirt square. I like that seems very promising to me.
That's the American way.
You don't have to go buy your firewood because I mean that's just like a farce in itself again. But
So with firewood, living in California, the winters weren't incredibly harsh. We still got snow, and it was still cold, not negative 20 or 30 degrees cold, because that's fucking insane. How do you guys live here? It's actually a sin.
maybe.
But it still got cold, and we didn't have any sort of oil or electric heat in my house. We just did it by firewood. Maybe we did have some sort of electric or oil, but we never turned it on. We never could. We couldn't afford it. So we did wood, and my dad had a table saw and other kinds of saw, hobby saw, and we would just go out back into. We had this area that for some reason was termed by the locals Little Korea. It was another land that was owned by the DWP. And so we'd go out there and we'd just pick up dead trees and go. You can't really do that here in Canada because everything's so wet.
Yeah, there's almost like forever wet to almost everything that we have around here. And if it's not, then we are in deep trouble. But I guess it's because, like, there's so much water. Like, we're closer to water masses, like, almost all the time. Be it a lake, a river, a creek. And that just fuels the humidity in the air, and it gets absorbed into the plants, and they just don't want to let it go.
California's been through a drought for the last, 300 years, so.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a good thing our forests are wet. If they're not wet, they're probably burning to the ground.
Well, that's one of the scary things about San Diego, where my family used to live, is that one of my childhood memories is a dead branch falling down on an electric line and a fire blazing up behind my house. There's a plugin that you can get for your Google Maps, which is just California Forest Fire Finder, and it'll show you all the places where there were fires in California. And I quickly looked this up because I heard of a fire that was going on in what we would call north southern. So it's supposed to be like Central California, but we don't call it that. It's like if I were to say where I had lived, I'd say the northernmost part of Southern California, because they just don't do Central really. That's not a geographic. It's north or south, NoCal or SoCal. And I don't actually know anyone who says NoCal. So and there were like 5 or 6 fires up on the Google Maps. I'm like, where the fuck is all these fires coming from? Of course, it's California. It's just so dry that and we had a fire when I was in my junior year of high school, which is 11th grade, and it wiped out. It was just some assholes who were up in the hills who left a fire, like a campfire going, and it lit up and consumed like 12 houses, millions of dollars of damages.
They go quick.
Yeah.
Like with all the Fort McMurray stuff, like they're huge, and like they are so difficult to put out. That's why there's like a specific like forest firefighters, like wildlife firefighters, like they're
Oh yeah, we had only a volunteer service.
yeah. So there's a whole different like career that's different than just regular city firefighting and stuff like that. It's insane.
Yeah.
It's been a good evening.
What's your experience with fire, Mark?
My experience with fire is getting to burn a lot of dry and brushwood at my uncle's cottage when I was little. So we'd go up there for Thanksgiving or whatever, and all the little kids would run around in the forest picking up sticks, and we'd all bring it back to the campfire and just keep that thing like blazing basically the whole day. Of course, it was like going on October when everyone would go up to this like cottage without water. So there'd be like, a dozen kids there kind of idea, and we'd all be hanging out by the fire with, one adult supervising us. So, I mean, thank goodness.
It's a good thing you were on an island so that nobody could find you. In the sense that nobody could get you in trouble for how much wood you were burning.
I guess.
Because you guys still do that for like clearing, like when you take down a tree to clear out some areas, you gotta get rid of the wood somehow, and carting it back to the like.
No, yeah, you
mainland
don't
would
do
be
that. You burn it.
idiotic.
Yeah. You burn it at night, appropriately.
With a barrel.
Yeah, with the
Keep it
barrel.
to keep it contained and safe.
And to make a little chimney effect to pull the hot air up and make it burn faster. Real nice feature there. if you can get past the part where you feel like a hobo standing around a large barrel warming your hands. But once you get by that, it's pretty enjoyable.
It is a really nice cottage up there. Been up there for the past 2 summers now, visiting Mark's family, and
So everyone in
cool.
Canada has a cottage, right? Or everyone knows someone who has a cottage, right?
I hope so. Yes.
yeah, it pretty much from my experience.
I think it's I think the trend is kind of dying off now, 'cause I feel like the cottage was kind of an older thing. Like, I think it's going out of style now eventually with more immigrants and people who haven't grown up with cottages. They don't necessarily say, oh yeah, I want a cottage, I want to be able to go to the city. Like people who have grown up with a cottage living in the city, they know the enjoyment of going out to a cottage after spending a week in the city or so.
It's also a matter of with how much money it costs to have one house. Why would you try to have two? For some people, I think there's a smaller percentage of people who can afford to have a second property, and others might find it easier just to go camping instead because it's a lot cheaper to get, and you still get out in the outdoors, but it doesn't require multiple hundreds, thousands of dollars at one point in time to do it. So now cottages are more passed down generation to generation. For some people, or people are lucky that that's where they want to put their money. So my family, we never had a cottage, but every 3 or 4 years we'd go back to England to visit my mom's family over there and stuff like that. So we'd travel all over Europe instead. So we chose to have our leisure time a different way. So I feel like where that leisure money is getting spent is moving further away from a cottage or an investment and rather into individual entertainment opportunities.
Yeah, instead of having a cottage or traveling the world, I chose to become an immigrant. Those were my life choices.
That's fair. I mean, on the topic of cottage, do you want the good news or the bad news first, Tyler?
Well, okay, so let's get the good news.
Okay, the good news is I think over time the prices of cottages are going to be coming down as they become less popular. The bad news is when we're talking about cottages being passed down generation through generation, the estate tax on a lot of those properties is absolutely huge, and a lot of people end up losing the cottage because they just can't pay that much money to keep it in the family, which is kind of unfortunate. But
yeah, no, that's something that's really crazy about moving from country to country. I imagine that people would have the same experience moving state to state. Is just laws change so drastically. Like in California, if someone comes into your house uninvited, you have the legal right to then shoot them.
wow.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, especially if they have a weapon of any sort, or if someone pulls a knife out on you, you also then have the right to shoot them because it's been clinically proven that if someone within applicable knife range can pull out a knife quicker and do more harm to you than you can do with unclasping your holster, taking your gun out, aiming, and then firing.
Yeah. It's about 20 feet or so.
Yeah.
Which is actually frightening to picture, having to pull a gun out and shoot someone within 20 feet while someone's sprinting at you with a knife. And it's like,
Just a light jog with a knife would be...
Yeah, perhaps even more terrifying if they jog at you nonchalantly. You're really in for it then.
So we went out to a cottage a couple of years ago out to Quebec, and you brought something nice with you that I don't think I've heard the entire story of how it came into your hands. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah, that was some triple malt whiskey, was it?
Single malt
Single malt whiskey.
Scotch whiskey, yes.
It
And
was,
when we went into the LCBO to stock up for the weekend that we were out there, we found out that who was it that gave it to you?
This was a friend of my brother had given it to him, and my brother had given it to me because he heard I was going to a cottage. So
why did the friend give it to your brother?
I think birthday maybe.
Okay, that makes a little bit of sense because when we finally arrived at the LCBO, I quickly scoped out the label, and a whiskey is nice or trying to be presumptuous when it comes in a box, right? And so it's either good or it's something popular that's trying to look good. Like they have Jack Daniels in a box, but no one gives a crap. That's like shitty lingerie. It's just getting in the way. Just give me the liquor and go. But no, your Scotch came in a box and it was like $97.
It was really good.
It was a really good Scotch. It was like fantastic. It was like the water up there in the lake was pristine, but I felt like the whiskey was just that was the closest thing to pure water I could have had ever in my life.
Yeah. It's a good weekend.
Yeah, it was good. Made the stars shine a little bit brighter.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to report. I think I still remember all of it. So I mean,
Where'd that
what
bottle
was-
go at the end of the weekend?
Imagine it was recycled. I don't think we.
We
kept
didn't
it.
drink all of it.
Yeah, we did. We totally finished it, didn't we?
I didn't think so. I only
mean-
had a couple of glasses. Like, I was being reserved, but
Maybe.
I think you drank more than me that night, and I think Gordon had some at some point.
I don't know. I don't know what happened to it.
Whiskey, it's the greatest thing. Oh, so we need to, like, once we're done with the podcast, I'll show you. I found a really, like, a reduced, like, a deal at the LCBO. It's like a 10-year-old Canadian rye. It's fantastic.
Sounds neat.
However, it is getting up on 10 o'clock. We've been going for about an hour now. So whether you're watching us live on YouTube or whether you're watching us on YouTube later in your life, whenever this is going to be on the YouTube channel, and eventually once we have our website live, we might choose to post that there. It all depends on what we're going to make public, what we like private. If you're listening out there or you listen at any point in time, tell us how our audio's going. Are we cutting in, cutting out? Am I too loud? Is Mark too loud? Does Mark need to talk some more? What should we talk about? We'll get some more interesting guests on, or maybe we just need to start bringing in some more single malt. We'll see you next time on the Absynthe podcast. Good night, everybody.